I've ordered 4 tons of gravel to fill in that soft section on the west shoulder. They're trucking in from Azusa this afternoon. Put a crew on as soon as it gets here, will you?
Right.
Will you look at that?
It's not all.
They're both flat. Well, Hoyt, am I wrong, or do those look like bullet holes?
They look like bullet holes.
Code 3.
My name is Barrett, Assistant Sheriff, Los Angeles County. The officers of the Sheriff's Department are rightfully regarded as servants of the people. It is their responsibility to safeguard the public welfare. But the tax-paying citizen is an exacting master. Frequently, it is not enough that a deputy sheriff should be a vigilant peace officer. He must be statesman, diplomat, and public relations expert as well. Sometimes he faces a decision which would challenge the wisdom of a Solomon. This story is just such a case. July 17, 3:24 p.m. The complaint board of the San Dimas Sheriff's Station processed a call from a Mr. Calvin Bushnell, supervising contractor employed on the Pomona Freeway extension. Lieutenant Cavanaugh and Sergeant Getz were dispatched to investigate.
Bushnell?
Yes.
I'm Lieutenant Cavanaugh. This is Sergeant Getz.
Hello.
Neither you or any of your men heard those shots, eh?
Well, that racket? On a quiet day, you can hear an atom bomb drop around here.
And you couldn't tell when it actually happened?
I had no idea. I've been here since 7 this morning. Could have happened any time since. I wouldn't know.
What about motive? Could you help us with that?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. You could circle vandalism, I suppose.
Juvenile?
It happens all the time. Any number of petty nuisances pop up on a job like this. We don't like them, but they're a calculated risk, like rainstorms. And then, of course, there's them.
Them? What do you mean by that?
Now, let's quit kidding ourselves. We're as welcome around here as an epidemic of smallpox. The local citizens aren't exactly happy about the freeway slicing through their backyard.
Well, it's got to go someplace.
But they want us someplace else.
Yeah.
Deputies Cavanaugh and Getz investigated. Starting down one side of the street, they moved with systematic patience from house to house, questioning the residents in regard to any knowledge they might possess of the shooting. In every instance, they received the same response: nothing.
Officers! Officers,
Yes, ma'am, what is it?
would you come along with me, please? My employer would like to speak with you.
In regard to what?
Miss Ellsworth will tell you that. Just follow me. Miss Ellsworth doesn't like to be kept waiting.
Some tea, officers? It's jasmine. Mr. Ellsworth always said it was a soothing leaf.
No, thank you.
I'm driving.
Well, some cookies then. Fresh this morning. Dora's macaroons. Mr. Ellsworth always said if you wanted the enemy to lay down his arms, all you had to do was to promise him some of Dora's macaroons. It was a little joke of his. He called his mustache a cookie duster.
Well, maybe just one then, thank you.
You wanted to see us, Mrs. Ellsworth?
Oh, yes. Please do sit down. Oh, no, not that chair. Oh, dear me. That's Toby's chair. It's silly, I know. He's been put to rest now some 14 years. Everybody calls me a silly old woman because I live in the past. Yes, the past, where I spent the most beautiful years of my life. All I have now are the souvenirs. You can learn. One can live with an echo. Things like that chair. It belongs to the man that lived in it. Dying doesn't change that. A chair remembers.
I'm sorry, ma'am. The lieutenant and I are investigating a little trouble down the street, and we're pressed for time.
Oh, yes. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. That trouble down the street. It's awful. It's been going on now for a month or more without ceasing. Something must be done about it. I've tried, heaven knows, to be tactful and polite. But there's a limit.
I'm afraid you don't understand. Somebody's been shooting up automobile tires, and we're trying to find out who's responsible.
Why, I am, of course. I assumed that you knew that. After all, what was I to do? They left me no choice.
Let me get this straight, Mr. Bushnell. You mean you're not going to press charges against Mrs. Ellsworth?
The freeway has trouble enough without creating any more aggravation through bad press publicity. Having an elderly widow arrested. Now, wouldn't that make a fine thing for some enterprising reporter to get a hold of?
Age doesn't exempt anyone from obeying the law, Mr. Bushnell.
Maybe not, but it'd make a big club in her fist if she decided to use her trial as a soapbox. No, thanks. Believe me, it'd do more harm than good if we try to prosecute that screwball.
Well, that's up to you, of course.
Give her a lecture. A real good talking to. Maybe that'll scare her. That ought to do the trick.
We'll do what we can.
Oh, as soon as I finish up here, we'll go. I told Dora to pack everything. I was right, wasn't I? You have to supply your own toothbrush.
I beg your pardon?
You know, the jail. You have to bring all your own little things.
We're not going to arrest you, Mrs. Ellsworth. Mr. Bushnell has refused to prefer charges.
Oh, so they think they've won without that. I'm just a nuisance.
Mrs. Ellsworth. Mrs. Ellsworth, you've got the wrong slant on this.
You see this? My husband and I scrimped and saved and did without to purchase this land. Our paradise plot, he called it. 6 months after we moved in, he was dead. His heart resigned from 16 years of overwork. And you say I have the wrong slant.
Mrs. Ellsworth, we appreciate your feelings.
No, this land is ours, Toby's and mine. He gave his life for it, and now they come, forcing their way in like an asphalt snake into our paradise. I ask you, by what right?
The freeway is not encroaching on your property, Mrs. Ellsworth.
With the county's population increasing more and more every day, that freeway has to be built to alleviate traffic. It's for the good of the majority. You understand that, don't you?
Oh, let them build it somewhere else then.
But it's not that easy. There'd be people at that somewhere else, every bit as upset as you are.
I can't help that. Other people are not fastened to a piece of ground the way I am, a memory. To them, it's just a nuisance. To me, it's murder. But the law doesn't cover a crime like that. There's no penalty for killing a dream.
Shooting tires is not the right way to rectify those things.
Then I'll have to find the right way, won't I?
In the days which followed, a series of minor sabotages occurred at the freeway construction site. Though an around-the-clock guard was posted by the construction company, they failed to apprehend the culprit. While fairly certain as to the identity of the person responsible, Mr. Bushnell still refused to prosecute.
Oh, let it go. I'm not going to let some spunky little old lady get me down.
Then, on the afternoon of July 24th,
I'm warning you for the last time. This desecration must cease.
Lady, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'm just doing my job.
And I'm just doing mine. What I should have done in the first place. It's the only language your kind understands.
Honest, lady.
I mean it, every word. I'm not a woman given over to violence, but if you don't get out of here immediately, I shall begin shooting.
Just settle at my time, that's all I ask.
No, Will.
No, I'm not going out there again. In the last war, I did time with the Seabees without flinching. But this is different. I'd rather wrestle a boa constrictor than face a gun in the hands of that woman.
It won't happen again.
You bet it won't. Not to me, because I'm not going to be here. You got my address. Just mail me my check. I'm going to get a nice, safe job hauling nitroglycerin.
I suppose you know why we're here, Mrs. Ellsworth.
A voice of protest, however small, however lonely, must be silenced in the interest of the majority.
We'll have to have the gun, Mrs. Ellsworth.
You know where it's kept, Dora? I'm not afraid. As the widow of Toby Ellsworth, I could do no less. It's they who are afraid.
If you want legal representation, I advise you to get in touch with your lawyer now.
You think I'm not competent to speak in my own behalf?
Of course not.
Well, perhaps you're right, though. It should be all legal and proper. Yes. Yes, you'll see. There's one thing they can't control, the courts. In a court of law, I'll be vindicated. You'll see.
At 2:30 on the afternoon of July 25th, Mrs. Ellsworth appeared for trial at the Baldwin Park Municipal Courthouse. The hearing was held in the private chambers of Judge Dwight Lasco.
Mrs. Ellsworth, considerable effort has been made to spare you the humiliation of a public trial. The district attorney has consented to waive a formal hearing, largely because of your past fine reputation in your community. Yet, despite such deference, you have consistently been hostile and uncooperative.
I came here for justice, not for charity.
It is the intention of this bench to see that you receive exactly that.
If that were so, the freeway would be on trial here. It is I who am the injured party. I.
It is you who have broken the law, Mrs. Ellsworth.
Yes. I knew you'd say that. You're no different from the others. You're all against me. The whole lot of you. Even my own lawyer betrays me.
When counsel entered a plea of guilty on your behalf, he was acting in your best interests, Mrs. Ellsworth.
The best interests of the freeway, don't you mean?
Mrs. Ellsworth, your conduct, whatever the imagined provocation, has been immoral and irresponsible. And because of your standing in the community, less excusable than it might be in another. The court, therefore, has no recourse but to sentence you at this time. We are confiscating your gun. You are henceforth forbidden to possess firearms of any description except by the express permission of this court. For the offense itself, $100 or 10 days in jail. You may pay the clerk.
No. Not 1 cent of tribute will I pay.
Mrs. Ellsworth.
Oh, put me behind the bars if you like, but not 1 cent will I pay. Oh, you haven't heard the last of this. All of you, I promise you that. It doesn't end here. It doesn't end here.
As Mrs. Ellsworth promised, it did not end there. 10 days later, she was released from custody. Dora brought her home.
You must start the dinner, Dora. I have some phone calls to make.
Miss Ellsworth, are you sure? Do you think you should have bought it? You don't know very much about guns.
Well, what is there to know? You point the gun at somebody and shoot. Besides, they took our old gun away. You don't have to stay, Dora. It's not your fight.
After all the years I spent with you and Mr. Ellsworth, you think that I wouldn't know how to cook for anybody else?
I know it's not your way of doing things, Toby, but hello? Is this the residence of the Honorable Dwight Lesko? Well, may I speak with him, please? Tell him it's Mrs. Ellsworth, Mrs. Toby Ellsworth. They've had their fight. Now we'll have ours. Hello? Judge Lesko? I thought I'd phone you. I don't know exactly when or where, but I'm going to kill you. Mr. Bushnell's residence? Oh. Well, please tell him when he returns that Mrs. Toby Ellsworth called.
I'll take a run out and we can talk this thing over.
This time, I'm prepared. The grounds are lighted by floodlights, and if should anyone step on my property without my consent, I will not hesitate to shoot.
She's a sick woman. If she's got a gun, she'll use it.
If she's got a gun. That's what makes the situation so ticklish. We don't even know that she's armed. We don't even know that she made those phone calls. Oh, it was her voice, all right. But she can deny that. There wasn't even a tracer on those calls.
Lieutenant, we can't just sit on our hands.
Granted. But we can't proceed as we would in a normal criminal case. Now, suppose we get a search warrant to look for that gun. We approach the house. She fires on us. What then?
We fire back, that's all. We do the best we can.
Sure. But in a shooting match, somebody usually gets hurt. Mrs. Ellsworth, her housekeeper, or one of us. Oh, no. Nobody comes up with any hero's stripes in a scrap like that. It's like boxing 10 rounds with Whistler's mother. Even if you win, you lose. Had a kid or something. You know what I mean. This way you can't help but feel sorry for her.
Oh, wait a minute. You don't want to get to feeling too sorry for her.
How do you mean?
It may be you'll be looking down the barrel of a gun. What do you do then?
I've been trying not to think about that.
Customer, well.
Mrs. Ellsworth instructed me to tell you that you're wasting your time. You want to sit here, it's all right with her, she says. She's in no hurry. There are enough provisions in the house to last for months.
Miss Langford, could you reason with her?
Mrs. Ellsworth and I have been together for over 20 years now. I wouldn't think interfering in her affairs.
But there must be some way.
There is. Stop building the freeway.
This could last a month.
I wish there was some way to get her out of there. Of her own accord, I mean. But how?
It'd have to be an important reason.
Lieutenant, we could tell her that we're burning the Freeway Commission in effigy at the city park.
Hey, Sergeant, you just rang a bell.
Looks like we got a nibble.
Newsboys leaving these at every house about some protest rally for the freeway.
Dora, get my coat. Hurry. It's almost 3:30 now. Oh, they need me. They're waiting for me.
Now we got a real problem. She got a gun or not?
Well, we'll have to assume that she has. If she keeps that up, she's going to be going 40 miles an hour in the residential. You know, we could always give her a ticket.
Taylor, I'll tell him that the women's club and to stand by.
Certainly says here, today at 4 o'clock. There doesn't seem to be anybody here. Maybe it's been postponed. Would you make inquiries, Dora?
All right.
You know, if she's not armed, I'm going to look kind of silly pulling a gun on her.
I'd like to take a chance on talking her into custody. It'd be neater that way.
Yeah, I guess it would be. But what if she has got a gun? What if she's not in the listening mood?
Then we'll have to bank on her being a bad shot.
Oh, Tommy, I've been tricked. Well, I'll just soon take care of them.
Mrs. Ellsworth.
Oh, I know what you're up to, young man. You can't fool me. You deliberately falsified this flyer.
You're all wrong, Mrs. Ellsworth. We're your friends. We just want to talk to you.
Well, I don't want to talk to you. Now, you get away from me. I give you warning.
It'll just be a moment. We'd like to ask you a few questions.
You and your old questions. Oh, dear. Will you please tell me why these things don't fit into that thing?
They're the wrong caliber, Mrs. Ellsworth. They're too large for the gun.
Oh, that Dora buying the wrong caliber, too large for the gun.
I'll take the gun now, Mrs. Ellsworth, please.
Oh. Could I go home, please?
I'm afraid not, Mrs. Ellsworth. Will you come along with us, please?
Oh, what are you looking so happy about? Did you buy those big bullets on purpose?
I'm sure you can understand why the case of Mrs. Ellsworth was a rather trying one for us to handle. She was prosecuted for carrying a concealed weapon. She had that revolver in her bag. But on the recommendation of the district attorney and the probation department, Judge Lasko did place her on probation. I know you'll be interested to learn that Mrs. Ellsworth and the Freeway have finally learned how to get along with each other. Now may I present Eugene W. Biscaluse, Sheriff of Los Angeles County.
Friends, in dramatizing these cases from the Sheriff's Department on Code 3, I hope you and your families will understand more clearly some of the problems facing law enforcement agencies in this country. We hope you enjoyed Code 3, that you'll be with us again next week. Thank you very much.